Welcome to How to Be a Human Leader Without Losing Your Job. We're here to chat about human leadership in a way that's real and relatable, tackling work-life challenges, and offering practical advice to navigate tough decisions. Whether you're leading a team or navigating your own career, we got you covered. I'm Roberto Torres, a startup engineering leader, and with me is Trace Ollerkin, a Fortune 100 IT leader. We'll dive into the real world stuff, share experiences, and offer guidance on leading with compassion while keeping your career on track. Today, we will discuss how does a humane leader determine if a leadership style is a fit. Morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Roberto. Good to see you. I hope things are going well down there in Mexico.
Likewise? Yes, they are. The weather is turning from cold to warm, so it is amazing, man.
But you're still wearing a sweatshirt, so it isn't warm enough yet.
Because it is 8 a.m. in the morning and I won't be, this ain't Cancun. So that's why I have a hoodie.
A hoodie.
Yeah,
Very good. Well, it's kind of the same here. It's a rainy day, but I think winter's finally starting to release its grip, so that's good.
nice. I'm glad. Bob, is
So,
uh is human leadership a fad? No. What are your thoughts on this?
over the years, so over 35 years of my working career, a little almost 40 plus years of working. There certainly have been some fads. I don't think humane leadership is a fad, and I'll tell you why at the end. But I started to think about some of the things as I started to go up the management chain as HR or even the company would give us books to read. And the one that struck out to me is that I identified as a fad very quickly, and very few people did, was a book by Jack Welch, the CEO of CEO of GE, on top grading. This was a strategy where you wanted the top performers in your company. That sounds like a noble goal, right? I want the top performers. And I think that part's not a fad. I think the fad part of it was every year you had to fire 5 or 10% of the people, whatever your company chose to set up. And so what starts to happen is initially you do start to get top performance. You get rid of some people that weren't carrying their weight. There's plenty of good targets to get rid of. The problem is you start running out of poor performers and you start getting rid of kind of average performers. And that was sort of the strategy of the book, right? You're going to just continue to get rid of the bottom part, and you'd somehow have a company made of 100% top 1% performers. Wow, interesting theory. You're going to keep cutting away the bad people, keep hiring new people, only keeping the good people that you hired, get rid of some of the bad ones, and keep this process going like you're distilling the company to be pure top performers. Well, initially it starts to work because you had enough poor performers that you needed to manage, to get rid of. But eventually the teams start to realize that, theoretically, let's say you and I are on a team of 10 people, and we both recognize that, hold it, 1 out of the 10 of us has got to go this year. You start to compete with each other because instead of helping. Now, if you were having a difficult time on a project initially, my incentive is, well, if you win, the team wins, I'm going to help you. Until you start to realize that every year some of your people are getting fired, and if you don't perform well, you could be the next one to get fired. So it doesn't help me to help you. So instead of having a team that works together with cohesiveness, the team realizes this is like Survivor Island, the TV show. I got to eliminate everybody else so I come out on top. Now, granted, they're constantly adding more people onto the island, but it doesn't foster honesty. You even have sometimes people sabotaging other people's projects. So it really gets, it really gets challenging to have cooperation, a team, et cetera. And ultimately, is that why GE failed and it had to break up? I don't think that was the only reason, but it certainly was a big reason. And we did that too. And now Honeywell's breaking up. And while once Jack Welch and GE wasn't doing as well, they stopped pushing top grading as strongly at Honeywell, and they didn't always call it that. But we had it too, and it is an immediate change in culture because at UOP we never had that. We did not have that kind of thing. Sure, we did have layoffs occasionally when there's a business downturn, or if somebody wasn't performing, they got fired. But there was never a quota system. So we were always fostering teamwork, cooperation, and even cross-group collaboration, where engineering might be helping production or so on, and research would help engineering. And so you would cross boundaries all the time. But once you start top grading, it doesn't foster cooperation in the long run. Initially, it does because everybody wants to be the best until you realize that, hold it, if I help Roberto win, then I could lose. And unfortunately, I think that was a big part of what happened to GE. They just, you couldn't, not the very most egotistical top talent would say, well, it's never going to impact me. I will always be in the top 1 or 5%. But in general, the company doesn't survive by just the top 1% people, right? It's a whole team of people. You need everybody contributing, and it fell apart.
I know. And when you spoke about this book, I remember well back in the 90s when probably the CEO of the company have read or thought that it was a good idea. So he said to the chiefs or the heads of the company, hey, I bought you this book. We oughta apply it to the company rather than saying, hey, I know that you're professionals. I know that you have leadership styles. I know that you're caring for the company, but as well caring for your teams. I let you freely decide which leadership style should you follow. But instead of that, no, this is the book that you had to follow. Because usually with all this trendy stuff that there is a new guru, there is a new book, there's a new course, or there is a new whatever, people tend to follow without asking to their hearts if it's the best. Uh, if someone could thrive in this kind of environments, which usually doesn't, because only the sharks and the vultures who are this kind of a person uh, thrives into this, but takes away or crumbles or crushes the other kind of people. So yes, I'm pretty I have lived that kind of leadership style. And the thing is, we at the end are humans, everybody of us. It doesn't matter if we are sharks, vultures, we are in a humane leadership, we are whatever, we are humans. And if we treat humans as humans, we're going to get the better results rather, than providing not a warning, a threat. This year, 10% of the company is going to get fired. Either you turn yourself into a shark or a vulture or a kind of stuff similar to that, or you remain yourself. And myself leading you and among your team members in a proper way that fosters not only communication results, goal reaching that we are driven to reach those. No, it's a balance that I don't want to be in.
Exactly. And it destroys one of the best ways that people learn and develop is by having their teammates um, coach them and point out where they could do things better on their own. Because the leader, us even as humane leaders as we want to be, we can't be there at every development moment for our team. And they actually learn a lot more from their other team members, right? They're both working on a project together, or it's a team project on something, and they learn a technique or a style or a something that's very successful from one of the other team members, not from the humane leader. But if you set up a leadership style or an operation style for your company where it's super competitive, you will get some people that achieve really well. And then you're going to get other people who will see that this is, not helpful. I'm not developing. And they'll either quit or they'll get fired as part of that top grading situation. And I think that how I spotted that it was a fad was really around, does this foster productivity? Because ultimately, a company's more about productivity, to produce something. Whatever it is that your company does, you are producing some value to outside customers. And when you realize if that leadership style ultimately doesn't help the customers, then there's probably a flaw in it somewhere. And that's really what I started thinking about is that, and it was most obvious to me was sales. Because if my sales is that competitive that the bottom 10% is going to get fired, those salesmen are going to try and sell things that maybe are even the wrong fit for the customer at the moment, or maybe even get them to buy it before they need it, right? And then it'll sit idle and be wasting that company's capital that you just sold it to. So now your customer is not going to be happy. So when you start to do anything that kind of breaks up your customer value, then it might be a leadership fad because it's not sustainable. It won't continue. It can't continue to do that because, again, if you're motivating those salespeople improperly, they're going to be selling things that don't add value. Eventually, word gets around that it didn't add the value they promised. And the next thing you know, your sales dive. Even if you do have a lot of sharks and vultures up there at the very top of the organization, leading and selling, it's just not sustainable. And for me, that was a big sign is that competitive competing and competitiveness is good, but it's got to be in a way that it is enabling our company's value to our customers. And, at the end of the day, the whole team has to feel good about it. And if you only have the top 2 or 3 people feeling good about it at the end of the day, and the other 7 people of the team feel terrible, then it's not working. It's a fad.
Yeah, actually. And that I was at a company which culture was stick and punishment, you know? I don't think I don't know if you recall this,
Stick
but
and carrot. You either have a carrot,
yeah.
you get some
No, no, no,
benefit,
no.
or
No,
or
no, no,
only
no.
stick. You only had
Yeah,
stick.
no, stick and punishment. And it was, if I raise the stick, I will punish you. I will hit you with that. If I don't raise the stick, you're behaving well, but you know that I have the stick. That was the culture of the company.
Wow.
So when I try to implement humility leadership, the the CEO punished me because of that. And it, a humility leadership for me, well, it was something natural, actually, but it was something that my team members deserved, required it, and needed. And I wasn't allowed to use leadership. I had to only deliver instructions and make punishments if not only if they did something bad, but it was a custom, it was organic stuff that was, excuse me, going around. So For some people, humiliation might be a fad. For us, it is a way of life. It is something that it is deep within not only our hearts and our minds, but it is how we act, how we wake up from bed every morning and thinking the best way to motivate our team by applying this kind of leadership style. And that's why we were managers and we were directors, you know, because we tend to do this. And when the leadership team looks at us and say, "Oh, these guys, Chris or Roberto, bring results," it's because in some part, I don't know in which percentage of their humane leadership style.
Exactly. Again, it's back to that results, right? And so you are delivering value, the company grows, things go well. For some of the other different kinds of leadership fads that typically these books are sold at airports, at least that used to be the traditional way, right? Is, your
Oh yeah.
CEO would be traveling for business. He buys a book at the airport that's up number one bestseller of this leadership fad thing. Um, I think that anytime it's a number one bestseller book and you're reading the book and the company has to make you read the book because you don't have an interest in reading the book, that should make you suspicious of that leadership style too. In other
Mhm.
words, if you're not organically drawn to this method, right? The CEO buys 10 books for all the leaders and says, "Here's the leadership style. I just saw this at the airport." And it doesn't, he gives you the basic, premise of what it is. And you say to yourself, this doesn't make sense to me right away. It's probably a fad.
Mhm.
If it doesn't organically bring you along and say, yeah, I think that could really work, it's probably a fad. Not always give it a chance, right? You never know. But most of these fad books too talk about how quickly they're going to get results. And as us as humane leaders, we know that results for changing behaviors, et cetera, it takes time. You don't turn your style on and suddenly double capacity in days or weeks or even months, right? It can take time to go down that leadership journey. And those are some other things of fads, to watch out for. If it's promising super quick results that seem completely outsized compared to anything you've ever heard of before, it's probably a fad. And then if they've been on talk shows, forget it. If they've been on a TV talk show, then they really don't know what they're talking about. What they know about is selling books.
Yeah. And conferences and everything that makes them money, actually.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a fad. That's a fad for anything, not just leadership styles. When you see that kind of stuff, you should question, if it does it seem logical to you? It really doesn't. Well, then you need to really get in and analyze this more closely because if it really starts to seem suspicious to you, if it seems like, and again, for going back to the top grading one, to me it just seemed like this was going to cause infighting and corruption and potential sabotaging somebody else's project to make sure that you weren't the bottom 10%. That right away it struck me as that. And it certainly took quite a number of years for it to fail, right? But ultimately it failed terribly. So you have to trust your gut as a humane leader to spot these things and say, this just doesn't sound right. It seems like um, something could go wrong with this.
Yeah. And the thing is, you have to question yourselves with one big question. Would you like to be evaluated in this kind of environment? Would you feel comfortable? Would you feel productive? Is this something that you're looking for? I wouldn't say no for all these questions, because I know myself, I know what I require. I require a leader who guides me, and especially the one that I have, a humane leader, which is my manager actually, who leads me this way, and I love it. And he guides me really well, and it is the one that not only foster my productivity, but allows me to do the same with my team. It doesn't say to me, you have to go this road. You have to use these words. You have to use this punishment or these actions. No, he lets me go with my humane leadership style, and it works for me. It works for my squad, and it's something that I'm looking forward. So the big question is, would would I like this kind of fatness? No, I, I would.
Definitely. And I think that, um, you hit on a key thing of evaluating yourself against that criteria. Do you
Mhm.
feel comfortable with it? And, sometimes
Yeah.
when we're learning something new, we can feel uncomfortable at first. So I guess, I completely agree with you. We need to feel comfortable with it, but also be willing to be a little uncomfortable at first. But if to your core, as you're saying, I don't think this is how I would want to be treated in the long run,
Don't.
absolutely agree with you. It's wrong. It is absolutely wrong. Anything we try that's new is always going to feel a bit uncomfortable, but if it feels wrong and you've given it a fair chance, then you're probably being a humane leader and realizing this is not going to work in the long run. And the hard
Yeah.
part can be bringing that up to leadership to say, look, there's some flaws in what we're doing here. And if you get beaten down immediately, unfairly, it's probably because it's a fad. It's one of those things where the emperor has no clothes. Do you know that story? The emperor has no clothes.
Oh
So,
yeah.
supposedly he has these fine clothes that only the smartest and best people can see. And it's like, no, you're naked. You're naked and this is stupid. And if you're the only one who's saying that, you should always self-reflect and say, well, maybe I missed the point. Let me think about it from a different angle. No, no, you're naked. I'm sorry. I'm going to be the one person to stand up and say, you're naked. Because a humane leader sometimes has to take the heat.
Oh
The
yeah.
humane leader sometimes has to go and swim against the current. And you have to decide, is this the thing you're going to swim against the current for? But you have to look at it and say, this is wrong and I need to say something. Because otherwise it could, impact many lives. I mean, when you think about what top grading did to people at GE, it ruined careers for hundreds and hundreds of people, thousands of people,
Yeah.
people that were very good performers, just not the top 5%. And
Mhm.
while some people went on and had great careers and said, thank you for that lesson of what I'm not going to do, right? Because we've talked about that before as a humane leader. Sometimes the best teacher is learning what not to do. And so they observed this top grading and said, well, I ain't going to do that, and I'm going to start a bigger company that does better. Um, but boy, man, I just think about how many people's lives were ruined by that. But I do have one last thought on how to judge fads. All right.
Bring it on.
Would you be proud to tell your parents that this is what you're implementing?
Uh, I will switch it. Would I tell my son that I'd be proud of implementing? No, 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 I wouldn't. So I I agree with you totally.
That I think, when I really think about all the different fads I've seen over 40 years, the ones that were clearly the worst were the ones where I didn't want to tell my parents what I had to do. I didn't want
Mm.
to tell them what the strategy was because I knew they would look at me and say, while we wouldn't have called it humane leadership because it really wasn't a phrase that we had coined yet, but they would not have been proud of some of the things that the GE style made me do in my job. They would not have been happy about that. And I'm glad my parents have both passed, but I'm glad they never knew I had to do that, because I think they would be sad that I
Yeah.
had to do that.
Well, indeed, indeed. Okay. Mm. Well, I think with this, we should end this episode, which was really good. And it let me think about the future topic that we might discuss.
Excellent. Excellent.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Have a
All
great
right.
weekend.
Well, see you later.